For those of you, and I recognize some new faces among you, hope that you'll introduce yourself at the coffee hour to me and to the rest of the congregation, and a warm welcome to you. We're glad you're here. This is the 8th week of my injury to my knee, so I don't know what the future holds in store for me, but I'm hoping to be two-legged within a short period of time, relatively speaking. Just a few weeks ago, someone asked me, John, what is this Unitarian Universalism? What's your belief system? I said, well, we don't really have a belief system. It's more of a dance. We have ideas that we carry in our hearts, and we gather together to make them something beautiful. But not everybody gets it the first time they walk through the doors. We believe so many things, so many beautiful things about the best of who we are as human beings right now, but we often don't do it in a creedal fashion. We don't have a creed that we say week after week. That's not really who we are. I sometimes describe this as this religion, well, I describe it several ways. I often say it's the most fun you can have and still be a religion. And then I'll sometimes say, well, we're more of a process than a product. It's more about us being together that gives us our holiness rather than just one or two beliefs. Or as one of my colleagues said a little while ago, they said it's like sitting down and talking with Socrates after too much wine. We believe in each other. I think that's probably the most important thing to say about how we are together as a religious people. Because how we act in the world is more important than what we actually believe. What we believe is good, but how you act out those beliefs is what matters the most. William Ellery Channing, one of our great founders, once said that in all churches, people are better than their creeds. So that leads us to the question, well, what is it exactly that holds us together as a religious people? My colleague Tom Beloit, who at one time served the congregation in Overland Park, Kansas, went out to speak in favor of sex education other than abstinence. Well, when the reporters found out that there was a minister speaking in favor of sex education, they were all over him. And Tom said, well, I'm here because we do think that knowledge is important. He introduced himself and he said he was a Unitarian Universalist, and someone asked how to spell that. And then he said, well, here's how you spell it, you. Then someone asked him, what do you believe? And he said, well, that's a creedal question. We really come together as a people because we're part of a covenant, a gathering of mutual promise. It's what we are together that is the most important. Well, what do you believe about the Bible? And he said, no, that again is a creedal question. We believe many things about the Bible, but we're really here to be together as a people that are searching for higher answers. Someone said, well, what do you believe about God? And he said, well, that again is a creedal question. We're a covenantal church. I think sometimes we spend too much time thinking about what we don't believe and not enough time doing what we should in the world with what we do believe. You hear me? Covenant is an old word. It means mutual promise. And there are all kinds of covenants out there. There's covenants that have to do with land and use, and covenants that are part of legal documents. But we mean it in this sense, as being part of one another. The oldest covenant that we know of is the one where Noah is in the boat with his family and all the animals 2 by 2 or 3 by 3, depends on which translation you read, which I think was probably a little disconcerting to the camels. But in any case, Noah's there, and they find dry land. God had wiped all living things off the earth, right? That's the story. And then he said, I will never do that again, and then he created a rainbow, a bow. And that was a covenant, that was a promise. These flood stories, by the way, friends, are not just part of the Hebrew Bible, the Old Testament. There's a whole bunch, as archaeologists will say, there's a flood of flood stories. And they go back a long way. Almost every ancient civilization had a myth around floods. The oldest of those is the Epic of Gilgamesh, over 4,000 years old, which has a flood story much like this one. The covenant that we make with one another is a covenant, a promise to treat one another with respect and love, even when we do unloving things. That's the part to remember. It's easy to love one another when we're all getting along, right? Not so easy when somebody slights you. There are all kinds of covenants out there. A minister covenants with a community like this one to serve them loyally, sometimes for the rest of their lives. Even taxi drivers have covenants to get you from where you are to another place as quickly as possible. And in fact, there's the story of the taxi driver and the minister who come to the pearly gates, and St. Peter is there, and he lets them both in, and the taxi driver gets a nice fine house with a swimming pool, and the minister gets a shack with a cot. Now, this didn't seem fair to the minister, so he walks up to St. Peter and says, "What's up with the shack and the cot? This other guy got a mansion and a swimming pool." And he said, "Well, you both served, loved faithfully, you did your job, you got people where they needed to be. But sir, when you preached, people fell asleep, and when the taxi driver drove, people prayed." Feels good to laugh, doesn't it? We're not sleeping now. No, we're not sleeping now because we're dealing with a dumpster fire of a world, right? It's a real mess out there, and it seems to get worse every day. I think there's a tendency, and I said this last week in our country, to think in terms of individualism, that ethic of rugged individualism that I think may have led to some of the troubles we're facing right now. If everybody has the right to be whoever they are, include putting yourself on dollar bills and coin bits and whatever else is out there, I think we misappreciate, we're not appreciating enough that the individualism that we so love, both as Americans and as UUs, actually might be leading us astray. Scott Peck, who wrote a book many, many years ago on this, said, "The problem, indeed the failure of the ethic of rugged individualism, is that it only incorporates half of our humanity. The other half is being together. It isolates us from one another, and it makes genuine community impossible." And I was rereading Hannah Arendt's piece on tyranny, which she wrote at the beginning of the Nazi regime, in which she said loneliness, which is a symptom of individualism in America, could actually be the ground on which totalitarianism rises. Covenants in all different forms are around us all the time. The covenant, we say, really is our mission statement. We transform lives through love, service, and our welcoming faith. That's a covenant. It's aspirational. Susan Frederick Gray, who was the president of the UUA for 6 years, said that mission and covenants are the antidote to individualism. I like that. Here's the thing to remember. When you belong here, and you all belong here because you showed up, you belong here if you're online with us in spirit, you belong here if you participate in any number of our programs, and there are many, you are part of us already. You are already entering into the covenant of being together. We are not a member services organization. And people get this confused all the time. I don't like what you're saying, John, therefore I'm not going to pay my pledge. That's not how this works. You come regardless of who's standing or sitting here. You come because you're part of who you are. We're not the YMCA. You can't just stop paying your dues and be done with us. I mean, you can stop coming, I suppose, but to be together and to be in covenant is to be together. And if we ever needed this right now, let me tell you, friends, we need it right now. We need to be that community where we can ground ourselves in what's most important. And we're not asking you to make a vow, we're not asking you to recite a creed, but we are asking you to show up and be a part of us. No single concept is more central to our faith than this old understanding of covenant. And the power of covenant is the guidance it provides us in distinguishing between our behavior and our worth. Because that's an important distinction. I talked about it last week. It's important to realize that we are worthy because we're alive, but our behavior may not be worthy just because we're alive. And a covenant draws us back together by the best of who we are. And unlike the rest of the culture that's canceling people and calling people out in this political maelstrom, we call people in. And when there's a mistake, we call you in. We call you in because we need one another now more than ever. It requires that we be present to each other, with each other, at a time especially such as this. Sometimes I think we overemphasize what we believe and underemphasize how we believe it together. So if we're going to be passionate about it, we have to understand that this mutual promise we make is a promise to be religious with one another. Now, covenant is one of those intellectually religious words that sound like, I don't know, creed or catechism or charisma, or my favorite co-substantiation. Say that 6 times fast. It comes off as kind of jargony and intellectual. But the covenantal church that we're a part of is an old story. And unlike some stories where you can go into a church and you can hear a 2,000-word sermon on a 2,000-year-old scripture and then go off for coffee and have lunch like nothing happened, isn't what we're about. We're about bringing it and making it alive for each one of us. That heart, that spirit is really who we are. Covenant is enduring, it's evolving. It's something that we're doing all the time. It's the heart of what draws us together. Last year, we established a right relations covenant team. And this group of people, who you'll hear more about and more from as the months unwind, is here to work with us in small groups and collectively together as a congregation to put our best of our aspirations sort of down on the record of how we want to be with each other, how we want to remain in the right relationship. It's not a set of rules. It's not a, you can do this, thou shalt not do that, none of that. It's how we want to be together because, friends, as these times are dark, if we aren't clear about the light that we embrace together, then we're going to fall into that darkness and we won't be able to get back out. Can you hear me on this? So, how do we get Unitarian Universalism? Well, I always love what Francis David is purported to have said, the great Transylvanian prophet of our early movement. He said, we don't all have to think alike to love alike. It's a great idea. Not easy, but a great idea. Because the real problem is when you have to love the unlovable, right? That person who slighted you. Newcomers come here all the time and they say, whoa, where's this been my entire life? Wow. And they're in love with us, right? Who's in love? Everybody's in love. Yeah, everyone's in love. We're all in love with each other. That's a great thing, right? Until there's a tiff. Until you realize, oh, wait a minute. What happened? This happens almost with great regularity. About 3 months in, a newcomer will come to me and go, well, wait a minute, this isn't what I thought it was. I mean, everybody's not always nice to each other. I said, well, yeah, we're human. It's a community. The secret is, are you still going to be in love with us even if we're not always nice to each other, right? That's the secret. Because we make mistakes. I'll always remember what my mother said to me. She said, you know, careful who you ostracize in your life, because chances are you're going to run into them again. And I tell interns this all the time. I said, Careful who you piss off inside of Unitarian Universalism, because it's a small town. You're going to run into them again. Guarantee it. You may be even asked to serve them again in some way. And that's the hard part. I think early on, I was so worried about this that if I ran into somebody in the grocery store, I'd hide behind the cereal aisle and hope they didn't see me. And the other person would hope they didn't see me either, right? So we'd be pretending oh, hi, Reverend John. Oh, hi. Desperately trying to remember their name, but you know they're not happy with you. That's the hard part, because we can't hide behind the cereal aisle. Not really, not in these times. In these times, we need to be upfront, even with people that we may have had a disagreement with. We can still be civil. And obviously, civility is in great short supply at the present time. But we can be the experience and the mode by which we want other people to be. We have exasperated the worst in ourselves at the mass media level, in social media, in our politics. But the best of who we are is sitting in this room, out online, or in any number of congregations and small groups throughout America who want to see us become something better than what we are, who believe that we can be better together. And I believe that America is still here, despite the exhaustion we all feel. I think especially now, we need to remember that there's a lot of pain. There's a need for forgiveness. Tomorrow evening at sunset begins the Jewish New Year, Rosh Hashanah. And October 1st is the Day of Atonement, at-one-ment, as I like to say. Yom Kippur, the day when you make right what is wrong with those you have hurt. Offering forgiveness and accepting forgiveness when you can, but not always able to. And I want to be clear about this, because forgiveness is not always, you can't always accept it. It's not always possible. And you're certainly not going to forget how you were hurt. But what I do know is that we can do it more often than not. When Charles Roberts walked into that Amish school in Nickel Mines, only 40 miles from here, back in 2006. He was a deeply troubled individual. He had all kinds of problems. He and his wife had lost a baby early. After the baby was born, they had 3 other kids. And somehow in his mind, he had twisted this around to think that he was going to molest or then kill these little girls, these little Amish girls. 6 died, many were wounded before he took the gun to himself. The most amazing thing, and you've seen this, I'm sure, but I want to bring it to your attention again, after this terrible tragedy, was the 3 Amish elders who paid a visit to his widow. One of them was the father of one of the girls who had been slain. And they walked in, took off their hats, expressed their condolences, and offered forgiveness. Now, it really perhaps wasn't for his widow to accept that forgiveness, but the offering of forgiveness did 2 things. It showed the world that despite terrible tragedies, we can bring people back into love, even when they do terrible things. It can restore our humanity with each other. And in the case of the Amish, it can restore their community to some semblance of love. It was the hardest thing, I would think, for those elders, especially the father of one of the children, to do. And equally hard for his family to hear, especially his widow. But they did it because they were in a covenant of community together. They did it because it was the start of something else. It wasn't the end, it was the beginning. Friends, remember that the best of us are already sitting in this room, The best of us are all around us all the time. And when hurt comes, many more will support one another than cause pain. That's the reality of the world in which we live. Don't get distracted. See that love is at the center of everything we do. So may it be, and amen.